3 Mile Island containment problem. But, I mean, it's a real issue right now. So you got to be prepared, and that is the purpose of this show. So let me get back to our guest author, Peggy Layton, author of Emergency Food Storage and Survival Handbook. Peggy, are you there with me?
Yes.
Now, is this not a serious situation going on right now? You said in Utah you guys have been preparing for years. So let me ask you really quickly, what are the best types of food to prepare, and what should you not try to store? Like, what is a terrible thing to try to store as it relates to food?
Well, anything perishable is not good to store. And I started out telling you earlier that to store things like oatmeal and breakfast cereals, not the type of cereals that we're used to with the sugar, coating on it.
So you can't store Fruit Loops and Fruity Pebbles, because that goes bad really quickly?
Right.
Got
the
it.
things that I'm talking about are grains, like oatmeal and wheat and cracked wheat and cream of wheat and things like that will store for a lot longer. Rice is a good one for breakfast as well. And other things like millet. Millet's really easy on the digestive system.
What is millet? What is millet? My listeners want to know. What is that for sure?
Well, it's bird seed. It's little round, looks like tiny little round, small peas, I guess, just tiny. Think of birdseed. That's what they use for that. But it is so easy on the digestive system of children that they can eat it and it won't hurt them. If babies and children start eating wheat, they're just going to be sick.
Wow.
And so you've got to really think about children. That's why they start babies out with rice cereal, because it's easier on their digestive system.
Wow. And let me just say this. You guys, not too long ago, we dealt with Hurricane Katrina. And Katrina came in, and the geology, being in the bowl down there in New Orleans, the way that bowl filled up with water, a lot of people were stranded on rooftops. I think a lot of people would have done well, and Peggy, maybe you can confirm this. A lot of people might have done a little better if they were prepared with bug-out bags, right?
Yeah.
For my listeners who just tuned in, you're listening to the Survival of the Fittest show, the voice of reason, ZoWilliams, Foxxhole Radio, Sirius 106, XM 149. Our topic tonight is how prepared are you and your family to survive the next major disaster? So once again, really quickly, Peggy, tell us what the purpose of a bug-out bag is for the people who just tuned in.
Okay, you keep it close to your door, that if there's a disaster and you have to run, you grab that bag and it has everything in it that you could survive for 3 days. So we call it the 72-hour kit. It must have food in it, food and water and other things that are necessary, a little bit of money, coins. What if you don't have your cell phone? You may have to find a payphone to call your loved ones. It needs to have just some simple things in there, things that you can eat, maybe some candy, hardtack candy, or ready-to-eat foods like tuna. You can buy those tuna packages that are in foil. They last at least 2 years. There's other things that are easy to eat. You just open them and eat it right out of the package. Right. Those types of things. Mountain House food, I get mine at Walmart, but you can find Mountain House pouches, but you do have to have a way to boil water. So we have just a really small, it's called a jet boil. It's just a little stove that boils water, and we take Mountain House pouches because they're really lightweight, and they're freeze-dried rather than dehydrated.
So, Peggy, let me ask you this really quickly. What if your cell phone battery dies? I mean, because cell phones nowadays, once the battery is done and we don't have an outlet to some type of power source, how do we retrieve those numbers off that battery or off that cell phone? Do you think it would be better to maybe write those important numbers down somewhere?
Yes, and you should have them in your wallet or in your bug-out kit. You should have all that pertinent information. You should also have a great big magic marker so that you can write on your sidewalk, we're alive. Put your name, we went to Grandma's house, or we went, we took off for the next town. Somewhere you can write it on a building, you can write it on a car. You need a great big magic marker in your kit as well.
Wow.
And that way your family could at least find you, or you could, write them some sort of a note, because people will be looking for each other.
Well, let me ask you this. Is vacuum sealing, you know how they've got those little infomercials with that little vacuum where you pull out all the air and some food or whatever? Is that a good thing to have, vacuum sealed, with regards to preserving meats and things of that nature? Is that good for survival?
Yes, but I wouldn't try to do it yourself. I would purchase, you could put jerky, things that are dehydrated. You could put them in your own vacuum-sealed packages, but I would purchase them already vacuum-sealed, things like the tuna fish, and there's other things. There's kipper snacks, and there's canned chicken. And if you just look around, there are packages of meats and things like that, because you will need protein. And
wow.
if you're in a stressful situation, you've got to have some carbs.
Listen,
as well.
let me do this really quickly, Peggy. Ladies and gentlemen, if you've been in an area that was hit by a natural disaster, it could be a flood, it could be a hurricane. If you rebuilt your home after a hurricane, call me right now and share your story. 877-210-6106, that's the number to dial. If you were here in 89 when the earthquake happened, or in 94, right, during the Northridge quake. If you were here in California, wherever you are, if you've experienced a natural disaster and was able to come back from it, because it's hard to survive alone when things are okay, but when things hit the fan, like a natural disaster, like I said, shouts out to Japan right now, shouts out to Thailand. They just had one, maybe 2-3 hours ago. So when you're in that situation, call me right now and tell me how you survived. Tell me what happened. In Myanmar, Thailand, 6.8 magnitude, Thursday, March 24th, just happened, man. Very major earthquake. Trust me. Call me right now, 877-210-6106. That's the number to dial. Peggy, let me ask you another question.
Yes.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how prepared do you think average Americans are with regards to surviving man-made or natural disasters? How ready do you think we are in general?
We did a poll in Utah, and it was about 3% of the people that were pretty much prepared or thought they were ready. 3%.
So are you telling me a whole lot of people are going to die if something major was to happen? Is that what you're telling me?
I hate to think that. It's a gruesome thought. But, if people are not prepared, if they don't have any water's the very first thing to go, and you can't find it. When there's a disaster, there could be, like Katrina, there could be water everywhere, but you don't have any to drink. And you could dehydrate really quickly. And if you have other types of foods that need to be rehydrated with water, you're not going to be able to do that.
Because if you remember Katrina, a lot of people were stranded on roofs, and they were waiting for some help, and the thing that they did, they created a bunch of signs that said we need water. A lot of people needed water, and they were surrounded by water, but there was water they couldn't drink, and they didn't have any tools or utensils to take that water, purify it, and drink it. So that was one of the major things, and one of the major requests that people were asking for during Katrina was clean, fresh water. Let me ask you this: true or false? Less than 2% of the population is engaged in agriculture or fishing. Just 2% of us are feeding the other 98%. Is that true or false?
You're asking me?
I'm asking you, Peggy.
I would say that's probably true.
Yeah. Only 2% of the population in America is engaged in agriculture. So, something as simple as having your own little garden, right?
Yeah.
If you started your own garden, what should you have in it? What should you prepare?
Well, we have a garden, a huge garden, my husband and I and our family, and then we have a greenhouse that we can grow food year-round. It's called the Growing Dome, from GrowingSpaces.com. It is the most fabulous greenhouse that I have ever ever had. I mean, I dreamed about getting a greenhouse for years, but I researched it, and I found this one, and we wouldn't have any other type of greenhouse because this one, you can grow food year-round.
Wow.
And so we always have fresh vegetables in the winter. But then during the times that we grow our garden, we have all kinds of things: onions, potatoes, carrots, peas.
So you guys are pretty much
tomatoes.
Stocked. You guys are pretty much well stocked, right? You got 7 children, you and your husband, that's 9 people. You guys got to be prepared, yeah?
Yeah, but what it is, it's more than being prepared. It's a way of life. It's called provident living. It's where you grow your food, and then your excess food is bottled or canned for the winter. We have a root cellar where we put all of our squash, our potatoes, our onions, our carrots. Anything we want to save for the winter goes into the root cellar, and it stays a constant temperature so that it never freezes, and so we can keep food year-round.
Wow.
And so we plan this all year. We're working towards it. It's just a way of life. And so we take care of ourselves. It's like the pioneers used to do. They had their farms, and they had, we have chickens too, so we get fresh eggs every day. And I know people in the city cannot do this, but we live in a rural area, so we are able to, and I feel very blessed for that.
Wow. I want to welcome all of my Sirius XM listeners back. If you're on Sirius, that's 106. If you're on XM, that's 149. I want to welcome all of you back. Again, tonight's topic is the survival of the fittest show. How prepared are you and your family to survive the next major disaster? Who you just heard speaking, excellent author. She's great. Go get her book, Emergency Food Storage and Survival Handbook. Peggy Layton. She's been on for about 25, 30 minutes now, and she's dropping some major science. And I think it's very important that we focus in and understand that she made a great point, and that is it's a way of life to be prepared for the inevitable, because it's inevitable. It's inevitable for earthquakes to happen. It's inevitable for hurricanes, tornadoes, or whatever. But if we walk through life in a fantasy thinking, nothing's going to happen to us, I mean, the earth has a way of shaking us up and waking us up at the same time. You're listening to the voice of reason, ZoWilliams, Foxxhole Radio, Sirius 106, XM 149, the survival of the fittest show. How prepared are you and your family to survive the next major disaster? I'm about to take a quick break, but I'm urging my callers, get on the phone lines right now. 877-2-106-106, that's the number to dial. I'm going to you when I come back. Ladies and gentlemen, back in the building. This is a great topic, especially in light of everything that's going on. And here in Southern California, every day we wake up thinking, is today the day of the big one? No, we don't. We don't even care. We be driving the freeway. We don't be paying attention to nothing, right? The big one could happen right when we at Starbucks or Jamba Juice or, doing something stupid. But let me just say this. Last week we did a show called The Estrangement Show, right? And we talked about all the different types of estrangement and what could happen. A lot of people don't realize you can be estranged through a natural disaster. Right? A lot of families in Japan and in Haiti were looking for family members because, those earthquakes tore families apart. So, again, I just want to send out, major blessings to Haiti and, Japan and Thailand now today. Again, Red Cross, go to redcross.org and really, help out, donate, do whatever you can. Tonight's topic, the survival of the fittest show. How prepared are you and your family to survive the next major disaster? And I want to thank Peggy Layton for being on. She dropped so much information. Please go buy her book right now, Emergency Food Storage and Survival Handbook. She was a great guest. We have another guest on deck, but before I get to him, according to the USGS, right, the United States Geological Service or Survey, this is a whole group of people who follow all type of seismic activity and stuff like that. The 10 states most prone to earthquakes are Alaska, California, Hawaii, Nevada, Washington, Idaho, Wyoming, Montana, Utah, and Oregon. Right? That's earthquake country, as they like to call it. The states with the most annual flood damages are California, Oregon, Texas, Colorado, Louisiana, Missouri, Iowa, Illinois, New York, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, and Rhode Island. And hurricane season or hurricane country and windstorm insurance, right? These states are, several southern states, of course, including Alabama, Louisiana, Florida, Mississippi, North Carolina, and South Carolina, and Texas. I mean, if you've gone through something, if your people have gone through something, call me right now, 877-2-106-106. That's the number to dial. If you live in any one of those states I called out, reach out to us. Now on to the next guest. This guy right here. This is a cold piece of work. When I found this book, I was like, okay, we about to have a serious situation. The brother wrote a book called When Technology Fails. Because I've always been a proponent that I think technology makes us lazy. I mean, how many people you know right now that has a cell phone that don't remember numbers without the cell phone? Back in the day, before cell phones, before pagers and beepers and stuff, we remembered every phone number. It was right in your dome. You remembered it. Now, because of the heavy reliance on all of these gadgets that contain all of our content, we're more and more dependent on these things. So what happened? What happens when technology fails? I have an author here. His name is Mark Stein, author of When Technology Fails, a manual. Matt Stein. Like I said, When Technology Fails. This is a manual for self-reliance, sustainability, and surviving the long-term emergency. Because let me just do this. What Peggy talked about earlier was the bug-out bag, and that's the 72-hour emergency bag, right? What happens when it's 96 hours? How long can a major metropolitan area go without being on the grid? What if it all shuts down for 3 or 4 weeks, a month, 2 months? What would happen, Matt, when technology fails? A manual for self-reliance. This guy is incredible. Matthew Stein is the author of the highly praised book, When Technology Fails, a comprehensive manual on sustainable living skills. As author of the Stein Design and Construction, he has built hurricane-resistant, energy-efficient, and environmentally friendly homes. This dude knows how to live when it's hard to live. It's hard to live. It's hard to survive in a natural disaster. Matt, come in, man. Welcome to the Voice of Reason. I appreciate having you on. Can we get deeper into this conversation?
Of course. How deep you want to go?
Man, hey, let me ask you. I'll jump right off the deep end right now. Other than a man-made natural disaster or man-made, what are the other ways that we could find ourselves in social upheaval where technology might fail and then, we turn back into feral animals?
Well, there's plenty of man-made ways, but there's a couple of really scary natural ones that could be a huge zap on the country. Well, one's natural, one's man-made, but they're both similar. Mm-hmm. And that's called a super solar storm or an electromagnetic pulse. People call it EMP. And they're kind of similar and related, but one's man-made and one comes from God. One, we got no control over one, we got lots of control, or somebody has control over the other one. Mm-hmm. So what does that mean? That's when you have some big sunspots that throw out they project a whole bunch of stuff, a coronal mass ejection out of the sun. It heads towards the Earth, and when it hits the Earth, and if it's not too bad, you get these really cool things called northern lights. And, we don't see them much down in Southern California, but I grew up in Vermont, and I'd see them on occasion, and I spent a summer in B.C. climbing mountains when I was a teenager, and they were really incredible. So anyway, back in 1989, they had a pretty big solar storm that hit, and it gave us a taste for what a really big one will do. It wiped out a major power transformer that knocked out power to like 9 million people in Quebec. Now, us here in America, we didn't care much about it. It was just Quebec, so who cares? But the thing is that in the 1930s, there was one about 10 times as strong, that if it had hit the United States, instead of one of these big transformers, it would have knocked out a few hundred. And you say, well, what's a few hundred transformers? Well, these transformers are like millions and millions of dollars. They take a year. Normally, they take a year to put on order, and they're custom-made for every power plant. Nowadays, they don't stock spares, more than one or two for the country, and we've got a few hundred in the country, and they take, instead of a year, because China and India are ramping up so much in the last few years, now they take 2 to 3 years to put these on order and buy them. So if all of a sudden our country's lost like 200 or 300 of these transformers, then it basically means we're screwed. That life as we know it is over for a long period of time, and the grid is totally fried. Stock market crashes. Water doesn't get pumped. Food doesn't get delivered. Gas stations run out of gas. It's like, if you don't know what you're doing, it's panic time. And
so
if you do know what you're doing, it's hopefully not so bad.
So Matt, I'm sorry for interrupting because this is such an incredible topic, Matthew. A lot of people don't realize how fragile the infrastructure is. This electronic digital grid we have. It's very fragile, correct?
Totally fragile. I mean, think about it. When people's Blackberries go down for a couple hours, people are freaking out and having panic attacks. But it's really not about panic attacks and freaking out. It's about just-in-time deliveries that keeps food going, that keeps machines running, that keeps chemical plants going, and the electronics that are like most sensitive to this EMP or from a nuclear blast or the solar magnetic storms, the one that's most electronic are these remote. What is that? That's like engineering talk. That's where, say you got a chemical plant or say you have a nuclear plant, like we've got 104 of them in our country, 104 nuclear reactors. You don't have somebody reaching inside a nuclear reactor and like tweaking things with their hands. Everything's done remotely by electronics over the wires. It senses positions. The control systems move these rods up and down. It keeps the reactor cool, keeps pumps going. If all of a sudden the most sensitive electronics to EMP on the planet are these control systems that keep the reactors, keep the pipelines flowing, keep the chemical plants going, keep our gasoline processed, all are actually the most sensitive to this EMP or solar storm. So we get a major solar storm or some jerk like Gaddafi decides he wants to he bought a nuclear weapon, say, from Russia when they fell apart 20 years ago, and, he's got a lot of money, so maybe he bought one of those. He says, well, instead of busting a single city in the United States, why don't I just, I got this missile that I bought from the Soviet Union. I'll just launch it towards the United States and blow it off 100 miles above the surface. Well, what does that do? Well, it sets off this EMP, which is kind of like the solar storm. And, most of our cars, 90% of our cars will still be running. Only 10% will be stalled on the freeway, not figuring out what to do and saying, hey, man, my car just stopped. Problem is all the sensitive electronics in these with long wires on them and all these grid transformers with long wires on them, those wires pick up all the signal of EMP and they fry everything. So suddenly the grid's down, and not only the grid's down, we got 100 or maybe only 50 reactors that have lost their control, and they're burning out of control like Japan because all the electronics that controls all that stuff in the reactors just got fried instantly, and nobody can do anything about it.
And let me say this, Matthew. I'm a big fan of Animal Planet. And I was watching a special, they were talking about pigs, right? And I know this sounds like it's off the subject, but it really isn't. Let me just follow me here.
Okay, I'm following.
Right? They said a pig goes wild faster than any other animal when released back into the wild.
Okay.
It takes about 2 weeks before it grows its tusks back and its hair comes back, and he's just wild now.
Really?
My question is, how long would it take a
human being?
A human being. Once we're off the grid, and I've done the research and about this particular topic, and they say most people only have about a week's worth of food in their pantry, and most people don't know how to forage. So how long will it take before we start looting and killing and shooting?
Well,
Talk to me.
It all depends on the society. I mean, when you look at the Japanese, when they're hungry, they're going and they're standing in line quietly and patiently, and, lines are like 9 hours long, and I think the average American looks at that and says, wow, boy, if push comes to shove, I'd like to be in a society like that instead of a society where people got lots of guns and knives and they're out killing and massacring each other because they're hungry and they want some food to eat. So I think your odds in America are that things will go ballistic a lot sooner than in many other places. But here's the other side of the coin. The other side of the coin is that usually in a disaster, it brings out the best in most people and not the worst. That most people band together and help each other out, and it brings out the better of the human spirit. Now, when Katrina hit, the media focused on those guys who are out busting into stores and walking off with TVs and stereos, and the people who were raping and the people who were doing all that. But I think that 19 out of 20 of those people were helping each other out and extending a hand to the other guy and doing the best to, with a bad situation. And our media in our country, it's like they like to show the violence because that's good copy that keeps everyone watching TV. But I think that the other side of the story is usually better. Now, when people get really hungry, it could definitely be a different story, especially with a heavily armed nation like America is.
Yeah,
What do you think? What do you think you're going to see?
I think we're going to see Beirut in Pasadena. I think it's going to get crazy. I really believe so.
When you think about Pasadena, think about like the Northridge quake. Okay, that was a 6.8 or something like that on the Richter scale. Mm-hmm. And that Northridge quake knocked down like 6 freeway interchanges and snarled traffic for about a year in the LA basin. Mm-hmm. Now, if we had a quake that was, say, 1.5 points heavier, like an 8.5, which we certainly could, that's like 50 times stronger than the Northridge quake. So instead of 6 freeway interchanges, there'd be 600. All of a sudden, how are you going to put L.A. back together when all the bridges are wrecked and all the power plants are gone and the wharfs are wasted and the airport is wasted? Where are you going to start putting it back together? And what are you going to do with, 12 million people in the basin? How many people you got down there now?
At least 27, if you count all of the surrounding areas, Riverside, San Bernardino, it's at least 27 million.
So see, you're talking a lot like Tokyo area, and basically you can't evacuate an area that size. There's no place to put everybody. Where are you going to do that? So all of a sudden now you've got a place where the infrastructure is like, they still haven't rebuilt New Orleans. New Orleans is still all messed up.
So
now imagine now if your whole infrastructure is shattered and all the bridges are down, and you got 20 million people who got no power and they got no food and they got no potable water. It's not going to be a fun scene. That's for damn sure.
Man, let me ask you a couple more questions before we take this next break, because you're going to be with me. We're going to roll and we're going to take callers. We're going to do a bunch of things, but just stay with me. I have to ask you this question though. We were talking about earlier with Peggy Layton about water and how important water was. How can one go about disinfecting something like ditch water, using sunshine or simple household chemicals? How do you disinfect that?
Well, in my book I tell you all kinds of methods, and I try to tell people what great high-tech gadgets you should have in your grab-and-run kit, your go bag, whatever you want to call it.
Oh, let's do it.
But I also tell them how to do it the old-fashioned way. If you don't happen to have any cool gadgets, maybe your house fell down and all your cool gadgets are stuck inside, and you've just got your bare hands. So let's talk about cool gadgets first. If you got ditch water, the best thing to have in your back pocket is a backcountry water filter, like a Katadyn or MSR. And I design these things for a living. I'm an MIT engineer, mechanical engineer. I design products, and I've designed water filters. So you can trust what I say. I'm a true expert in the water area. So the best thing is if you've got one of these pump-type water filters, and you can stick it into the ditch, and you can take green, scummy water and pump it through it, and the outer ceramic cartridge filters out all the bacteria and the scum, and the inner carbon center in the cartridge filters out the bad tastes and odors. So you get good, sweet, clean water out of the scummy ditch, and it's safe to drink.
And really quickly, Matthew, what is it called again?
Well, these are backcountry filters. You can buy them at like REI or any kind of surplus place or backcountry place. But the brands that I like are the MSR, Mountain Safety Research, or Katadyn. They're both well-known brands, and they're used a lot in the backcountry. And you can take scummy water and put them in. Now, they have pleated membrane ones, too. They're easier to pump. And the pluses is they take longer to plug, but the downside is they're not serviceable. Once they're plugged, you got to have a spare cartridge. So the ones with the ceramic cartridge in them, and you don't have to remember everything. It's all on my website at whentechfails.com and also in my book. But the ceramic cartridge is field serviceable, meaning you put it in that scummy ditch and you start pumping, and all of a sudden you're not getting anything out of it. You can take it apart, and you can scrub it off, and you can put it back together again, and you're off and running again. Whereas the other ones, once they're plugged, the only thing you can do is chuck the filter and chuck the cartridge and put a new cartridge in. You can't service it other than putting a new cartridge in. So that's why I like those two. But there's another cool gadget that you should have on hand called a SteriPen. And you guys are in LA.
A SteriPen?
Water is so critical. A SteriPen, you've seen that movie Men in Black, right?
Absolutely.
Remember that? Guy pulls out the pen, says, "Hey, everybody take a look here," gives a little click, and everybody's memory's gone.
Absolutely.
Well, you pull your SteriPen out of your pocket, and you stick it in your bottle of water, and it's got a light bulb on it, a long, UV tube, and you give it a click, and poof, all the bugs are dead, okay?
Really?
Yeah. Now, here's the hitch, though. If you got green, scummy water, well, the light's not going to kill all the bugs because the scum's going to shelter some of the bugs. You'll still get sick. So the SteriPen is only good on clear water, but it's a great thing. If you got clear water, clear water can have Giardia, Cryptosporidium, really nasty bugs that Cryptosporidium made 500,000 people sick in the city of Milwaukee and killed 112 back in the 90s, and it survives chlorination. You can soak Cryptosporidium cysts overnight in pure Clorox bleach, and some of them might survive. So it's a really tough bug. Wow. But the little zap with the SteriPen, and poof, they're gone. Mm-hmm. Or if you filter through that cartridge, then Cryptosporidium is a big bug, so it's easily filtered out in a bacterial cartridge. So now Clorox bleach.
That's the SteriPen.
Yeah, SteriPen, one word. SteriPen.
Where can they buy that?
Same place.
This is great.
You buy them at REI, recreational equipment, any backcountry place, places that are sportsman, hunter oriented, or army surplus survival kind of places. Certainly, plenty of places online too. So any place that caters to hunters, backcountry, and kind of people.
Oh, my God. Listen, we got to take a quick break. My goodness, Matt, this is crazy, right? I love this kind of information because this is not if, this is when. Am I right?
It is when.
This is when. This is not if, this is when. And I think it's very important that people prepare. We're about to take a quick break. Me and the homie Matthew Stein, author of When Technology Fails. I'm telling you, it's a huge phone book size of information. Please reach out, grab his book, go to his website, whentechfails.com. It's very important that you guys call me right now. We're about to go to callers. I know Matt might want to take some calls. If you've gone through a natural disaster, if you've survived, call me at 877-2-106-106. That's the number to dial. I'm ZoWilliams, voice of reason, Sirius 106, XM 149. We'll be back in a quick second. Ladies and gentlemen, ZoWilliams, the voice of reason, back in the building. Tonight's topic, the survival of the fittest show. How prepared are you and your family to survive the next major natural disaster? Call me right now if you live in California, Alaska, Hawaii, Nevada, Washington, Idaho, Wyoming, Montana, Utah, Oregon, Florida, Louisiana. Call me, Texas, if you're going through, maybe you made it through a natural disaster. Call me right now, 877-2-106-106. That's the number to dial. I also want you to text Red Cross to 90999 and make a $10 donation. Please do that. Again, there was another earthquake in Thailand. There's an earthquake in Japan a couple weeks ago. I mean, Haiti is still under the rubble. Come on, do that for me right now. Text Red Cross to 90999 to make a $10 donation. Again, tonight's topic, the survival of the fittest show. And I want to welcome all my Sirius listeners, Sirius 106, and all my XM listeners, XM 149. Tonight's topic, once again, the survival of the fittest show. How prepared are you and your family to survive the next major disaster? Also, go to www.ready.gov. Check all of these websites out. We're trying to provide all of this information. And let me reintroduce you to my friend, my homie, because he'll be the guy I'm going to call when the crap hits the fan. Matthew Stein. He's the author of When technology fails, we've been having a great conversation. He's been sharing a lot of information about stuff like a SteraPin, where you can put this Men in Black kind of device in a bottle of water and kill all the bugs. We need to figure out how to live once this thing hits us, right? Talk to me, Matthew. Where's Matthew? Is Matthew in the building? Okay, well, until we get Matthew back on, what I'd like to do is go over a few more stats here. Listen, since 2004, more than 1 billion people around the world have lost their lives, their homes, businesses, family members to natural disasters. That's 1 in every 6 people you meet. Matthew, is that not crazy?
Well, that's a pretty amazing statistic. I never heard that one before.
Yeah, man, we done found all types of stuff on this stuff. Let me ask you this real quick, because you talked about that ditch water and how to disinfect it with the SteraPin. If I am in my home and a terrorist act or earthquake or superstorm takes the grid down for several days or more, what is the first thing me and my family should do?
Well, the very first thing you should do is fill your bathtub and your sinks and any kind of jugs you got with water, because if the grid's going to be down for a while, the chances are you still got water pressure, but not for long. So, and most of us can live a month without food or more, and you may not like it, you may not feel good, but you could live, you could survive. But without water, if it's hot weather, after about 3 days, people tend to start dying. And if you've got to be really active in very hot weather, like the Sonora Desert kind of thing, a single day out in the heat in the Sonora Desert with no water can kill someone. So water's your number one thing. Is make sure fill up whatever you can. I had a friend who was on vacation in Kauai, and this is a number of years ago. And it was actually on 9/11. Before the famous 9/11, there was another 9/11. And they went for a walk on the beach, and they looked out to the ocean. They saw the water going out to the ocean, and they saw this huge black cloud. And they thought, oh, man, something's going on. Now, it wasn't water receding like a tsunami, but the winds were picking up, and by the time they got back, the winds were over 100 miles an hour. And they got up to 165, 180 mile-an-hour gusts that night. And the first thing he did was he went and he filled the bathtubs up with water, and he told everyone not to flush any toilets. Now, you don't want to drink out of the bowl. That's the dog's permanent water bowl. But you can drink out of the tank in your toilet, provided you don't have that little guy in the boat in the blue stuff floating around, the tidy bowl thing. Then there's a good couple gallons of water in the tank that's drinkable. So you flush that toilet, you just flush down enough water for an adult to drink for 2 or 3 days. So you don't want to do that.
Wow, this is amazing stuff right now. Because one of my favorite shows is Man vs. Wild with Bear Grylls.
Yeah,
and I see him doing things that's like, I don't know if I would do. He's doing it for fun. He's showing, I've been trained to do these things, but I don't know how many people would have the wherewithal to go after a skunk and cut its head off and get sprayed up and skin it and eat it. And
but he's getting paid a lot of money for that
one. he really is, but I think, like you said, because a lot of people don't understand how fragile this digital infrastructure is and how quickly things can go bad. So let me ask you this. What are the 6 major trends that threaten the world as we know it today?
Okay. Yeah, I wrote this post on Huffington Post that went totally viral on this one. It's called, I called it The Perfect Storm, 6 Global Trends Converging on Collapse. So I'll go through them really quickly, and then if you want to talk about each individual one more, we can. Now, these are trends that, like as a scientist and engineer, in high school you take algebra or you draw those graphs, and if the graphs are headed for the bottom, like a ski jump, you don't do something different, they're going to hit the bottom. So on each of these 6 trends, they're all potentially civilization busters, which means if we keep doing business as usual, just doing what we're doing, then each of these trends will hit bottom, and they will collapse the world as we know it. So here they are. Number 1 is the peak in world oil production. Now, we have now passed the halfway point in oil production. Well, people say, well, big deal. Well, back in late 70s, I don't know if you're old enough to remember that, but there was the oil the Arab oil embargo, and they put the squeeze on America, and they just dropped world oil production by 5%, and it doubled gasoline prices, actually tripled them in 6 months' time. There was huge lines. You had gasoline rationing. I'd wake up at 5 in the morning, go park my car in a line at a gas station, go back home, go to sleep until the gas station opened up. It was pretty serious. Right now, we're headed into that point. We're like right on the verge of that. And governments have been ignoring it, saying it's not real, it's fake, whatever. They've just been ignoring it. But in the last year, the U.S. military, followed by the German military, followed by the U.K. military, all released reports saying that this is real, it's happening, it's hitting our world. It may be in crisis proportions within 3 years' time. And to be honest with you, it could be in crisis proportions in 1 to 2 years. But they're predicting maybe 3 years' time crisis proportions. So that's number one. Number two is climate change. Some people believe it, some don't. I call it global weirding. It's not always warm, but, the weather is definitely messed up. It's definitely not like it used to be. And anybody who's over 20 years old knows that things are changing in our world weather-wise. Mm. Number three, collapse of the world's oceans. Now, think about this. The tuna, we all get some canned tuna, whatever. All of the world's large fish species, commercial large ocean fish species, are over 90% gone. That means if you take 9 out of 10 of those fish out there, they're gone. There's only 1 out of 10 left. So they're all basically collapsing. We have right now 11 of the 15 of the world's major ocean fisheries are either already dead, like the world's richest fishery in the world. They thought it would never run out. It's dead. It's gone. George's Banks off the eastern seaboard, United States and Canada. Gone. Dead history. 11 of 15 on the edge of collapse or already collapsed. And the world's the coral reefs, they went from 12% dead to 24% dead in just a few years' time, and another 50% are in the verge of collapse. And it's about 75% of the world's coral reefs are threatened with collapse. You say, well, who cares about coral reefs? But they're part of the balance of our world.
They're very important.
They're like the lungs of the ocean. They're like the rainforest of the ocean. They stabilize carbon from the atmosphere. They provide a key to the balance of the ecosystem. We're acidifying the oceans, the planktons, the bottom of the food chain. We lost 73%, 3/4 almost of the world's zooplanktons. Versus 1950 to now, 3/4 gone. History, bottom of the food chain, out of there. Forests.
What about the phytoplankton? Are we still?
The phytoplanktons are gone, but not as bad as the zooplanktons. They're declining. I haven't heard a number saying how much. Nobody knows exactly why they're all gone so bad. Has it been our fishing? Has it been the chemicals? Is it changing in the waters? I believe a lot of it also is acidification. See, when we burn all this coal and all this gasoline and stuff, it puts CO2, carbon dioxide, in the atmosphere. Well, when the rain comes down the atmosphere, it catches that carbon dioxide, makes carbolic acid rain. Well, the acid rain doesn't just fall on the land, it goes in the oceans too. So we're gradually changing the pH of the oceans, making them more acidic, and that's dissolving out the limestones. It's causing crustaceans to fail eventually, and it's probably significantly responsible for the loss of planktons. But I don't know if there's a definitive answer on what way we screwed up the ocean so bad that 3/4 of those zooplanktons are already gone and the phytoplanktons are going down too. Who knows? I don't know the details. I don't think they've figured it out yet. But they're going, and that's not a good sign. Okay, number 4 is the forests. We cut down over half the world's forests, most of that in the last 50 years by a long shot. We're accelerating that within your and my lifetime, provided we don't die soon in a disaster. At the rate we're going, there won't be any more rainforests in the world. So that's part of the carbon-oxygen cycle, but more importantly, each giant tree acts like a huge water pump. It pumps millions of gallons of water back into the sky. It's part of the water cycle. It's part of what keeps our weather stable on the planet. So when you cut down those trees, something called desertification happens downwind. See, imagine now if each tree supposedly has an evaporative surface area, a big tree, like a big oak, a big pine, whatever, large tree, supposedly equal to a 40-acre lake. Hard to imagine. I don't think it's that big, but that's what I've heard. That's what I've read from a good source. So each of those trees, when you cut them down, it's not pumping that water back in the air. So down. See, in the the Garden of Eden was this place called Fertile Crescent in the Middle East,
right.
4,000 years ago. That was between the Tigris and Euphrates River. Now, back then, it was like the Garden of Eden. Well, guess where it is now? It's it's Iraq and Iran. It's like a desert wasteland.
It's a desert, right.
And once upon a time, it was filled with trees. It was beautiful. It was perfect for human beings. And human beings grew so well. They grew big cities. They cut all the trees down. They plowed up the land. They irrigated. The irrigation brought in salt, and eventually, without the trees and with the died. And it's a big, giant desert now.
So let me ask you this, Matthew.
What we're doing to our world.
I hate to cut you off, but you're saying so many things that are, I've read, I've researched, I've studied, and I just got to ask you this: are we, human activity, are we to blame for some of the natural disasters? Is human activity connected to the natural disaster cycle?
Well, there's a lot of scientifically, you could say no, except that it's related to the weather changes in terms of natural disasters. So it could certainly be pointed to the heating oceans causing Katrina and being that bad. But as far as an earthquake happening and a tsunami,
right.
There are people who say that the consciousness of mankind affects the weather and consciousness of the world. There's people who say that Mother Earth is infected with human beings and that it's going to bring natural disasters to get rid of the infection. Whether that's true or not, I can't say. As a scientist, you'd have to say that's a lot of hooey. But as a spiritual being in the world, I have to feel that there is something to that. Whether there is or not, I don't know. Scientists could say there's always been earthquakes. There's been megaquakes throughout history. There's been fluctuations in the world's weather. And the thing is that there's natural fluctuations, and now mankind is changing the chemistry of the atmosphere and the systems of the planet in ways that not only do we have the natural fluctuations to worry about, now we have the unnatural fluctuation that's the added effect of mankind's putting into the world. So that's like on top of the natural disasters, we're making unnatural disasters on top of the natural ones.
Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to the Voice of Reason, ZoWilliams on Foxxhole Radio. We've got to take a quick break. You were just listening to the voice of Matthew Stein, author of When Technology Fails, a manual for self-reliance, sustainability, and striving for surviving the long emergency. I tell you, I got this book, and I'm taking questions directly out of it because he put so many notes in here for me. I'm so appreciative. I hope you guys go out and get his book. He will be back in a quick second. We've got to take a quick break. Tonight's topic, the survival of the fittest show. How prepared are you and your family to survive the next major disaster? I'll be back. We're back in the building. People cracking jokes right now, and it's hysterical. When Technology Fails is the book written by my guest, Matthew Stein, a manual for self-reliance, sustainability, and surviving the long-term emergency. Matthew Stein has been dropping major science. Tonight's topic, the survival of the fittest show. How prepared are you and your family to survive the next major natural or man-made disaster? Let me just do this real quick. Japan, right? These are the details on Japan. Magnitude 9.0. Date and time, of course, Friday, March 11th at 2:46 p.m. It was a major earthquake, and they're reeling right now. And from that earthquake, it was a double doozy because it was a tsunami that came from there. The numbers on how many people have died is amazing too. It seems that they've just reached 24,000 people dead or missing. Haiti, because this country was less developed, they consider it a third world country, 222,570 people, basically 300,000. And then on top of that, 300,000 others were injured. 1.3 million people displaced, 97,300 homes destroyed, and then they say 188,000 were damaged. And then tonight in Thailand, Myanmar, at least 25 people, and I'm sure the numbers are going to raise, That was a 6.8. So Haiti was 7.0, Japan was 9.0, and Myanmar is 6.8. These are major earthquakes. But look what's happening, though. Right here in Yellowstone Park, in the heart of America, there is a super volcano called a caldera, right? I told you this thing is like 35 miles long, 44 miles wide. They call it a super volcano, okay? And this thing, they say, erupts every 600,000 years and is about 60 or 70,000 years overdue. Now, they say when this thing kicks off, right? When this thing blows up, they say just imagine it'll be it could be 2,500 times the strength of Mount St. Helens. This is a monster. This is a major monster right here. And with that said, Matthew, author of When Technology Fails, go buy the book, okay? WhenTechFails.com. Is that not your website, brother?
Yeah, that's the website. And, if you click on the articles, then you'll find totally free things like your grab and run kit, all the stuff I suggest you have in that, how to purify water, protect yourself from the next superbug, antibiotic-resistant superbug coming along. All kinds of really great, totally free information on the website. Totally free.
Wow. So let me hit you with this, because I want to know what you think. What do you expect to see in 2011 and 2012? Because 2012, the Mayan calendar, and before you left, everybody, December 23rd, 2012, before you left, you talked about the consciousness of men, right? And how that might have an effect on the weather. I'm a believer. I'm a proponent of that. I believe that consciously we do things that the universe or Mother Earth or whatever is like, I've had enough of you guys. Let me smack this portion of the world with something just to remind you that you're not in control. What do you see? Okay. What do you expect to see in 2012, 2011?
What I expect to see is that by the end of 2012, the 6 trends I'm talking about, and the last one is the population of the planet, that what we're doing to the world will be so in our face by the end of 2012. There'll be no denying that we have to have like an Egypt transformation. Right now how the people in Egypt rose up and took control and kicked out the old guard and they're putting in the new guard. I think by the end of 2012 it'll be so apparent to the peoples of the world, it'll be so massive, the changes that we're doing on the planet, that they'll wake up and they'll say, there's no money to be made in a dead planet, and letting the corporations rule the planet for profit and not concern about the health and welfare of our planet, it's taken us all down. And I believe that by the end of 2012, it will be so in our face that will be undeniable, and that people will wake up in massive numbers and say, we're taking back our world, and there's what good is government if it's not for the people? What's it for? I don't want it to be for the corporations and for the top 1%. I want it to be for the world.
So are you saying that in order to fix how we're governed, it may take a natural disaster, or it may take a revolution?
I agree. Whenever I give talks a lot in front of crowds of people, and I'm unusual because I appeal to people on the right and the left and in the middle. I'm one of these crossover artists, authors, where I've got people on the far right and people on the far left and all kinds of people in the middle that come and listen to me talk, because it affects everybody. And when I ask people, what do you think? Do you think it's too late? Do you think we passed the tipping point? Do you think that no matter what we do, the world is toast? And, maybe 20% of the audience raises their hand. Then I ask people and I say, how many of you think that we're fine, that everything's good, and that, business as usual can just keep going and everything's fine? Not a single hand goes up. Not one. Nobody. Not one. Then I ask people, how many of you think it's going to take a real serious disaster and we'll get slapped around really, really badly, and the governments and the people will wake up and say, we've got to really do something, not just, change our light bulb, but something more significant than that. And most of the hands, including myself, go up. Now, the other question, which nobody knows the answer to, is by the time we're slapped around that badly, will it be too late then? Will we be past the tipping point? Will we go over that cliff? Will we be the Titanic headed for the iceberg, and that by the time we decide to change direction,
it'll be too late?
you're hitting that iceberg no matter what you do. Nobody, including myself, knows the answer to that. Now, here's something to think about. People say, well, okay, you're an MIT guy, and how long have you been a survivalist? And I said, well, I don't really still think of myself as a survivalist. And I said, well, wait a minute. Okay, you're writing about the failure of technology. What gives? Why? Well, back in 1997, at that point in time, I'd had a 20-year practice of prayer and meditation. And, I'm not one of these guys who sees and hears and voices all the time or anything. And I just sat there and I just quietly asked for guidance and inspiration. On that day, I got a bomb dropped in my lap. Suddenly, just as soon as I'd asked the question, I've asked that a million times, and I don't usually hear very much, I got this storyboard outline, like 30 pictures holographically, dumped into my head instantaneously, graphically outlining the scope of my book, When Technology Fails, from start to finish. My first thought was, no effing way. It's like, I don't know all this stuff. I can't do this. And the little voice in my head basically said, nobody does. Nobody knows all this. And it assured me I had the skills and talents that with my engineering background and dogged determination, I'd go out and I'd find the information I needed, and that I'd get the inner help and the outer help to finish the project off if I took this assignment on.
Wow.
So meaning
maybe that was kind of like a mission.
It was.
Purpose.
It never felt like my idea. Because, let's face it, in college, a term paper was a major head-banging ordeal for me. I never thought of myself as a real writer. It was a big ordeal. It took a lot of time, a lot of head-banging to make it happen. And this is a giant, giant book, instantaneously dumped, fully organized into my head. It's way beyond my mental capabilities. Had to come from somewhere else.
Yeah, I saw Limitless, too. That was that nice movie. Did you see Limitless?
No, I haven't.
You gotta see this movie, man. He takes a pill, and then the book just falls into his head. And that just, what you just said reminded me of that scene where the book just fell right into his head, and it was written, and then he became this great author.
To be honest with you, it was kind of a bummer. Because, first, it took me like a year to decide maybe it was a good idea and I could do it. But then I started the next year, after I decided I would take the assignment on. The next year, I'm working on a book proposal and sample chapters, and I'm focusing on the things I know. Like I've been a carpenter and I've been into solar stuff and engineering, and I design water filters. So there's like the water chapter, the building chapter, stuff I know. And then the little voice comes in and says, no, you got to focus on this future of the world chapter. It's chapter 2 called Present Trends, Possible Futures. And it's like, oh, damn, I was almost done with this proposal, and now it's telling me I got to do this other chapter. So I start focusing on reading the world's best writings, the eco-writings on the state of the world and what's going on. At that point in time, the term peak oil had not even been coined yet, and I start reading, M. King Hubbard and stuff on peak oil, and all of a sudden I realized our world is...
Matthew, hold on one second.
Yeah.
For the listeners, define what peak oil means, because they need to know what that means.
Okay. Peak oil means, every oil field in the world has a lifespan. Mm-hmm. So it's like some geology guys go out and figure out that there's oil under here. And they explore and they put their instruments in and say, yeah, there's oil. So then they drill a well and they start pumping some oil. And then they drill a whole bunch of wells and they start pumping more. Well, eventually that oil field gets so tapped out that no matter what they do, the production starts dropping off. And so like in Texas was like the Saudi Arabia of the world 100 years ago, and most of that oil's gone now. So peak oil is when the world's ability to produce more oil is like maxed out, and it's starting to decline.
And you said we're at 50% now.
Yeah? We're there. We're at that peak now. And what that means is that no matter how hard... See, in the past, as the world grew, and like Japan and China and India, built up and start wanting more oil and more cars, all we had to do was put some more wells in the ground and pump some more oil, and we could say, okay, we're growing at 10% a year, we're going to get 10% more oil next year. Well, those days are done. They're over. They wouldn't be drilling 10,000 feet under the ocean, 15,000 feet from the surface of the ocean to where they get oil in the Gulf, where that horizon blew up. They wouldn't be doing that if the easy-to-get-to stuff wasn't already gone.
Yeah.
Yeah. They wouldn't be taking tar sands. You know how terrible for the environment it is? Until oil costs like $75, $80 a gallon, you can't even make money so much. They have to burn all of this natural gas to boil the tar out of the sand so we can get gasoline. People think we buy all our oil from Saudi Arabia. You know where we get most of our oil from? Number one source?
Where?
Canada. Tar sands in Canada. Number one source for oil in America. Tar sands are the worst environmental thing. Horrible for the planet. But our thirst for oil is so great now that the easy-to-get stuff is gone, and we're going after tar sands in Canada, Venezuela, going after the deep ocean stuff, the far Arctic stuff. I mean, we're up a creek right now.
Well, since we're on the topic, do you think this is the underlining reason for why Libya is a target?
Yeah, well, Libya,
Let's talk
not
about
so much. The underlying reason why we made peace with Gaddafi was because he agreed to pump his oil for us. And we put Saddam Hussein in power. We trained him. We supplied him with the CIA, with weapons, with money, with everything he wanted. So long as he kept being our point man and pumping oil and doing what we wanted, we didn't care who he killed. I mean, that's a nasty thing to say about our government, but it was true. We put him out. Back in the first Gulf War, they looked and they said, if we take him out, there's going to be just a giant vacuum, and there's no one to take his place, and it's going to be a giant mess. So let's just knock him down to size, and hopefully he'll start towing the line and doing what the CIA wants, and everything will be good again. Well, he kind of said screw you to America, and he started doing his own thing again. So I said, damn, we got to go take him out again. So then we went out in the second Gulf War. There's no mistake that between Iraq and Iran, a quarter of the world's known oil resources are in those two countries. And there's no mistake that we went into Iraq and that we've been rattling the saber going into Iran, because that's a quarter of the world's remaining oil right there in those two countries.
Wow. I got to take another quick break. Man, this dude has a wealth of knowledge. He's dropping science. His name is Matthew Stein. He is the author of When Technology Fails, a manual for self-reliance, sustainability, and surviving the long emergency. This is a great show. The Survival of the Fittest show. How prepared are you and your family to survive the next major disaster? You need to call me right now, 877-210-6106. That's the number to dial. I see all of these people online and Twitter and Facebook talking to me right now. The show is crazy. We'll be back in a quick second to finish it off. No one man should have all that power. The clock's ticking. Back in the building. Tonight, man, has been an incredible show. The Survival of the Fittest show. How prepared are you and your family to survive the next major disaster? And it comes at a time when all kind of stuff is going on in the world. Like I said, the Thailand earthquake just happened, 6.8. Again, text Red Cross, right, to 90999 to make a $10 donation. Please do that. Again, my special guest that's been on with me for the entire second hour of the show is the author of the book When Technology Fails. And I urge that you go to his website, whentechfails.com. This brother's name is Matthew Stein. He's been on and he's been dropping a lot of information. And all of the women in the office right now have been urging me and pressuring me to ask you about, sanitation, like how to take a bath, or when everything just breaks down, because, the sister here got her hair done, and she was like, people can't be walking around stinking, and it's very important that, she understands how the bathing process is going to go down. Please give her some information, because she's listening right now. What are the steps to sanitation? I mean, how do you deal with sewage? Because like you said, once that, that water pressure is gone, then it won't be any flushing of the... the internal burritos.
The ditch in the backyard, if you're on a high-rise, it's going to be pretty tough. The ditch in the backyard is about your best bet for sanitation. You try to dig a couple feet deep, maybe you dig a trough, and you put some boards and you put little towels around it for privacy for people, and once one fills up, you got to leave at least 6 inches or a foot of dirt on top of it, and you move to the next spot in the ditch. I mean, that's the way it was been done for millions of years, and
so
when you get a big city, it's going to be rough.
Kind of like how we deal with our dogs, maybe.
Yeah, you got it. I mean, wow. and to be honest with you, the average adult should count on about if you have a gallon a day per person, that's 8 pounds of water. You can't carry that on your back very well. Say you get a family of 4, you want to carry the water for them for 3 days, that's 100 pounds of water. That's where your water filter is so important, because you can't carry that in your back. There's going to be food and clothing and first aid and all that's more important than carrying that water. But you need water to live. It's very, very important. So if you don't have much water, you're not going to be washing with it, or at best a sponge bath. But here's something you can do when your clothes start getting really rank because you don't have any water to wash them. Then you lay them out in the sunshine. You give them a sun wash, because the UV rays from the sun will kill the bacteria that are making the stink in your clothes. So
we're a little too fashionable for that. People are that's
well,
not
in an earthquake. Did you see many fashionable people wandering around Haiti after the earthquake? I mean, how fashionable do those tent cities look? You're going to be in tent cities in L.A., if you're lucky. You're going to be lucky to be in a tent city. So, when it's bad like that, you're going to do whatever you got to do, and it's not going to be fun. And the more prepared you are for it, the better, because you're going to have some toilet paper on hand, and you're going to have your water filter, so you can take that scummy duck pond water and clean it and drink it. Because I once ran out of water. I was climbing El Capitan in 1984, right after my daughter was born. And it was probably global warming was happening, but we never heard of that then. It was just a Memorial Day weekend. I figured, no sweat, it's going to be perfect weather, it'd be beautiful. Well, it turned out it was record heat. It was like 100 degrees plus in the south-facing walls, 3,000-foot wall. Start of day 3, we could have drunk all the water we had left in breakfast in day 3 and still been thirsty. And we had, a day of climbing and 100-plus heat in the direct sun, no shade. Ran out of water. Our last mouthful of water, middle of the day. It was so bad. My partner had asked me a question. I'm at 150 feet above him on a rope trying to talk to him and answer. My tongue would stick to the roof of my mouth. I'd start gagging and retching. If I tried to talk, my mouth was so dry, my tongue would stick like super glue, and I'd just about puke then. It was terrible.
Wow.
When you're that dry, believe me, you will drink the most scummy, disgusting, smelly ditch water. If that's the only water you got, you'll drink it. Because you're so miserable, you'll drink anything.
So Matthew, let me ask you this. I need you to tell everybody where to get your books. I'm sure they're Amazon.com, BarnesandNobles.com. I'm sure they're everywhere. But also give out your website again. Give out your email address. I want people to follow you. I want people to find you and correspond with you from this show. How do they do it?
Well, go to the website When Tech Fails, WhenTechFails, and if you click there on the book, it'll take you direct to Amazon. You can also support your local bookstore. If they don't carry it already, just simply ask them to order it, and they'll get it in a couple of days. Most bookstores, Barnes & Nobles, those kind of Borders, I think Borders are gone now, I don't know. But anyway, most bookstores will carry it, and if they don't carry it, they can get it in real quickly, and you can order it any place online. Now, as far as reaching me, there's a contact button on the website, so you can click on that, info@whentechfails.com. That'll get you there, and you can ask me any questions you want. Great free information. It's all there.
Well, listen, I just want to say thank you very much for taking the time and spending as much time as you did with us. I really appreciate it. Your information was valuable beyond belief. It was priceless, and I'm sure my listeners and fans will show how priceless that information was by seeking you out, getting your book, and supporting everything that you do. I want to thank you again for coming on The Voice of Reason.
Well, you're welcome. And, it's real cheap insurance to pick up that book. Could save your life. And I like to close with my motto, and my motto is I ask everyone to do your best to change the world and do your best to be ready for the changes in the world. And Thank you so much for having me on tonight.
Hey, Matthew Stein in the building. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Now, as is commonplace, I like to do my final thoughts. But before I do that, please donate. Go to www.redcross.org. A lot of people in the world are hurting right now. And I think, giving is the conduit to growth, and a lot of people need some help right now. So please reach out and do that. And with that said, here are my final thoughts. Listen, as human beings, we tend to make an attempt at preparing for everything. Our future wife, our husbands, how many kids we're going to have, our career, even, our dream car or our dream home. In many cases, for better or for worse, every aspect of our lives are incessantly fantasized about or planned out to the letter. But what's amazing to me is that most people spend very little time planning for the inevitable and always impending threat of a natural or man-made disaster. Think about it. Virtually no country has gone without ever experiencing some kind of social upheaval, whether due to natural or man-made disasters. Something has always caused a breakdown in society. Well, one would think that this kind of preparation would be just beneath the surface of every family's mind, especially in light of the fact that even our government has a plan in place for such an event. It's called COG, C-O-G, Continuance of Government. If the government plans to continue itself, why shouldn't we have COF, C-O-F, Continuance of Family? It's very important that you prepare, because whether you do or not, it's going to go down. Natural disasters, whether man-made or natural. I'm ZoWilliams, and that's my final thought. You've been listening to The Voice of Reason on Sirius 106 XM 149, Jamie Foxx's Foxxhole Radio. This is the kind of radio we want to do, man. We want to inform, we want to educate, we want to teach, we want to share. Go to my website, www.zowilliams.com. Email me, zo@SiriusXM.com. Follow me on Twitter, @ZoWilliams. Let's continue the conversation. This is a public service announcement for 2 hours long. Let's continue to help each other. I'm ZoWilliams. I'll see you next week. Peace.